So imagine you've got a child who bangs her head against the wall like 50 times an hour.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredibly severe.
Right. It's a dangerous situation.
Yeah.
So you introduce this brand new therapy protocol. And by the end of the week, the head banging just completely stops.
Which is amazing. You celebrate, right?
Exactly. The parents are thrilled, you're thrilled. But then your clinical director comes in, looks at your data, and asks, hey, did your therapy actually work? Or did the child just, fight it off a cold this week and they're too tired to engage in the behavior?
Oh, the classic clinical director reality check.
Right. So how do you prove, like without a shadow of a doubt, that you and specifically your intervention actually caused that behavior change?
That is, that's really the ultimate hurdle in clinical work because we operate in this landscape where human behavior is influenced by, honestly, a million different variables.
Yeah, like sleep, diet, environment.
Exactly, neurobiology. And cutting through all that noise to find out what's actually working requires a totally airtight scientific framework.
Which perfectly brings us to the mission for today's deep dive. Welcome to Behavioral Intelligence con Mara Sánchez. Today, we're officially concluding Domain D of the BCBA Foundations. That's experimental design.
Yes, finally wrapping up Domain D.
I know. And we're doing it by tearing into D.9, which is applying single-case experimental designs. And just so you know, we are pulling from a massive stack of sources today.
We really are. We've got the BAS 6th edition study guide, several of those notoriously tricky BAS mock exams.
Those are brutal.
They are. Plus the Ethics for Behavior Analysts workbook and some translated insights from Cooper's Applied Behavior Analysis text.
It's a lot of material. But before we jump in, just a quick reminder for you listening. You can find more resources and connect with us over at the Amethyst Therapy Services website, which is just www.amethysttherapyservices.com, or shoot an email to info@amethysttherapyservices.com.
Awesome. And, the goal today really is to bridge that gap between theory and reality.
Right.
Because whether you are actively prepping for your BCBA exam, or maybe you're a practitioner just trying to build, bulletproof behavior intervention plans.
Which we all want.
Exactly. This deep dive is going to show you how to move beyond just saying, oh, I think my treatment is working, to saying, I have mathematical empirical proof that my treatment is working.
Okay, but if we're going to strip away the guesswork, we really have to start with the core philosophy of how our field actually measures success. And I have to be honest, I've got a major bone to pick with the foundational premise of applied behavior analysis here.
Oh, boy. All right, let's hear the challenge.
Okay, so in medicine, or even just general psychology, when researchers want to prove a treatment works, they use massive group trials, right?
Sure. Randomized controlled trials.
Yeah, they get thousands of people. Half get the drug, half get a placebo, and then they compare the averages. But in behavior analysis, we rely almost exclusively on these single-case experimental designs, where an individual serves as their own control.
Right.
Scientifically speaking, how can you definitively prove a phenomenon with a sample size of one? I mean, it just feels like it really lacks statistical weight.
That reaction is incredibly common, and it really represents the biggest paradigm shift that you have to make when you start looking at behavioral data.
Okay, sell me on it.
Well, group data is powerful for broad trends, sure, but it fundamentally masks individual variability.
Masks it.
Yeah. Single-case designs, which, by the way, are technically called ipsative designs, meaning they use the individual's own prior behavior as the standard for comparison. They don't hide that variability. They focus entirely on it.
Wait, calling group trials a mask for variability seems a bit extreme, doesn't it? I mean, medicine cures millions of people using group data. It clearly works.
Right, and for a public health official who's looking at an entire population, group data is completely invaluable. But for a clinician sitting across from one specific human being, a group average can actually be a statistical illusion.
A statistical illusion. Okay, you're going to have to explain that one.
Let's look at the math. Suppose a medical trial tests a brand new blood pressure medication on, say, 100 people.
Huh?
And the published results boast that, on average, blood pressure dropped by 10 points.
Hey, a 10-point drop is a solid outcome. I'd prescribe it.
You would, but look at the raw data underneath that average. Maybe for 60 of those people, their blood pressure plummeted by 30 points.
Oh, wow. That's a massive, maybe even dangerous drop.
Exactly. And for the other 40 people, let's say their blood pressure actually increased by 20 points.
Yikes.
Right. So the mathematical average is a 10-point drop, but literally not a single person in that entire study actually experienced a 10-point drop. The average represents a hypothetical patient who just doesn't exist.
Ah, I see the gap now. Yeah, because if I apply that group average to my specific client, I have absolutely no idea if they're going to drop 30 points or jump 20 points.
Exactly. The average tells you nothing about the person sitting right in front of you.
Right.
Your responsibility as a behavior analyst isn't to know if, say, a token economy works for 60% of third graders. Your job is to know if it works for the one specific third grader assigned to your caseload.
That makes total sense. So single case designs use repeated measures of that individual's behavior over time to prove a functional relationship.
Spot on.
But still, if we are operating without a control group, without a placebo group to compare against, we're basically walking a tightrope without a safety net here. We need a mathematical way to prove it was our intervention and not just some random coincidence that caused the change.
And that requirement is exactly what brings us to the engine that drives all single-case research, which is baseline logic.
Baseline logic. Okay, let's unpack that.
It consists of 3 distinct phases. You have prediction, verification, and replication. And really, the clearest way to see the mechanics of this in action is through a reversal or withdrawal design.
An ABAB design.
Exactly, where A represents the baseline condition and B represents the treatment condition.
So let's walk through the mechanics of those phases. During that first A phase, you're just collecting baseline data, right? You just observe the behavior in its natural state without interfering at all.
Right, you're just watching.
And then once you have a steady trend, you make your prediction. You draw this kind of invisible line into the future, predicting that if you do absolutely nothing, the behavior is just going to stay exactly at this level.
Yep. Then you introduce the treatment, which is your first B phase. Now, let's say the behavior improves dramatically. You might feel super successful as a clinician.
Oh, you're definitely high-fiving the parents.
Oh, yeah. But experimentally, you haven't proven anything yet.
Yeah.
Because it could just be a coincidence. Maybe they started a new medication that exact same day, or they slept better.
Right.
So to prove your treatment actually caused the change, you have to withdraw it. You go back to the A phase.
And this is where the verification happens. Because if you remove the treatment and the behavior goes right back to its original problematic baseline levels, you've verified your initial prediction. You proved that the behavior doesn't just naturally get better on its own.
But you don't stop there. Because leaving a client in a baseline state with problem behavior, that's definitely not the goal.
No, definitely not.
So you apply the intervention one more time for the final B phase. And if the behavior improves again, matching the results of that first treatment phase, you have achieved replication.
You turn the behavior off, on, and off again?
Or on, off, and on again, depending on the behavior. But yes, that demonstrates experimental control.
You know, it's exactly like taping a leaky pipe.
Oh, I like that. How so?
Well, you're staring at a pipe that's dripping water. You predict it'll keep leaking. That's baseline. So you wrap this special waterproof tape around it. That's your intervention, and the leak stops.
Okay, right.
But to verify the tape is the actual fix, and maybe the water pressure in the house didn't just magically drop, you peel the tape off, the pipe immediately starts leaking again. That's verification.
I see where this is going.
Yeah, so then you wrap the tape back on, and the leak stops again. Replication. You have definitively proven the tape is what's controlling the leak.
That is a perfect analogy. And actually, the sources include a fantastic real-world application of this from a 2002 study by Romaniuk and colleagues. It's found in the Cooper text.
Oh, right, the choice study.
Yeah, so they worked with 3 students who were demonstrating some pretty severe problem behaviors, hitting, biting, yelling, and a functional analysis revealed these behaviors were maintained by escape.
Meaning, when academic demands were placed, the students acted out to escape the work.
Exactly. So the researchers wanted to test a specific intervention, providing choice. And the ABAB design was perfect for this. The first A baseline phase was just standard academic demands with absolutely no choice.
And I'm guessing the problem behavior was high.
Very high. Then the B phase intervention simply allowed the students to choose which academic task they wanted to complete first, and the problem behaviors just plummeted.
Wow. But to prove the choice was the active ingredient, they had to withdraw it, right?
They did. They went back to the second A phase, no choice. And the hitting and biting immediately spiked right back up.
Verification.
Yep. Then they reintroduced the choice for the final B phase, and the behaviors dropped again. It's just a flawless demonstration of turning a behavior on and off using environmental variables.
I mean, I see the logic completely, but taping a pipe is really low stakes.
Yeah.
If we're talking about hitting and biting, or even more severe behaviors like, I don't know, headbanging or elopement into a busy street,
Yeah.
we can't just peel the tape off. The BACB ethical code mandates that behavior analysts absolutely must minimize the risk of harm to clients. So intentionally withdrawing a successful intervention that stops a child from concussing themselves just to prove a point on a graph,
Yeah.
that seems fundamentally unethical.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a really critical limitation of the ABAB design, and your pushback is exactly why applied experimental designs have to be flexible.
Because we can't let a kid get hurt for the sake of science.
Well, exactly. We cannot ethically endure a prolonged baseline if the behavior is dangerous. Nor can we withdraw a working treatment and just sit back and let the client suffer. So in those high-risk scenarios, we flip the script and we use a BAB design.
BAB. So we bypass the initial baseline entirely and just start immediately with the treatment, the B phase.
Yes, you secure the client's safety first. That is paramount. Once the behavior is managed and stable under that treatment condition, then you briefly withdraw the treatment, that's the A phase, but just long enough to verify its effect.
Like just a tiny dip.
Right. The moment you see the data trend upward toward danger again, you immediately reinstate the treatment for that final B phase. Now, it lacks the robust initial prediction of an ABAB design, but it prioritizes human safety over pristine data.
Which is how it should be. And actually, we have a specific mock exam scenario in the sources that highlights an even better workaround for dangerous behaviors.
Oh, the Laney scenario.
Yes. So it features a client named Laney who engages in severe, high-intensity headbanging. The clinician wants to compare two different interventions, a sensory integration approach versus functional communication training. But again, any return to baseline is an unacceptable ethical risk for Laney.
And this is where the alternating treatments design, which is also known as the multi-element design, becomes your absolute best tool, because it completely eliminates the need for a baseline withdrawal phase.
Wait, let's look at the mechanics of that. Because if you're testing two different treatments on Laney without a baseline, how do you avoid just totally confusing her? Like, how do you know which treatment is doing what if they're happening at the same time?
Well, you don't run them at the exact same time. You rapidly alternate them. And the key mechanism to prevent that confusion is stimulus discrimination.
Ah, making them visually distinct.
Exactly. You pair each treatment with distinct, obvious environmental cues. So for Laney, maybe the sensory integration happens in the morning in the blue room with therapist Sarah. And the functional communication training happens in the afternoon in the yellow room with therapist John. You rapidly alternate these sessions day by day, or even half day by half day.
So the data paths for both treatments are plotted on the same graph, simultaneously growing over time. You're essentially racing the two treatments against each other.
It's exactly a race. And if the data path for functional communication training drops to 0 headbanging, but the sensory integration path stays high, the visual distance between those two lines on the graph proves functional control.
You proved FCT works better without ever having to take a dangerous baseline.
Precisely. And for you listening, this is a major exam tip. When a scenario presents a dangerous behavior like self-injury, severe aggression, swallowing dangerous objects, and it asks for an experimental design, immediately rule out traditional withdrawal designs. Look for the BAB design or the multi-element design. The exam is testing your ability to balance scientific rigor with ethical obligation.
That's a great tip. So multi-element designs handle dangerous behavior beautifully. But what happens when the limitation isn't danger, but the nature of the skill itself?
What do you mean?
Well, you can't ask a child to briefly unlearn how to ride a bike or forget how to read just to prove your phonics program was the catalyst, right?
Yeah.
Once a skill is in the repertoire, returning to baseline is literally impossible.
Ah, right. Irreversible skills. Those require designs that never withdraw the treatment. And the most widely used design in applied clinical settings for this exact reason is the multiple baseline design. It proves experimental control not by withdrawing treatment, but by staggering its introduction.
Staggering.
Yeah.
The sources outline a great scenario of a multiple baseline across settings. There's an RBT tracking a client's severe hair-chewing behavior across 3 distinct environments: the classroom, the lunchroom, and the recess yard.
Okay, so picture 3 separate graphs stacked vertically. You start by taking baseline data in all 3 settings simultaneously, and let's assume the hair chewing is occurring at high rates across the board. You then introduce your intervention. Maybe it's a differential reinforcement procedure where the child earns tokens for keeping their hands away from their mouth. But here's the critical mechanism. You only apply that intervention in the classroom. You intentionally keep the lunchroom and recess yard in the baseline condition.
Oh, I see. So if the intervention is actually working, the hair chewing will drop in the classroom, but remain high in the lunchroom and at recess. A
Exactly.
staggered logic here is just brilliant, because if the behavior change was just due to the client maturing or maybe getting better sleep that week, the behavior would have dropped in all three settings simultaneously. The fact that it only changed in the specific room where you applied the treatment proves your intervention caused it.
Yes. And then once the classroom behavior is stable, you introduce the intervention to the lunchroom. The behavior drops there. Finally, you introduce it at recess and it drops there. You prove functional control across settings, or you could do it across different subjects or different behaviors without ever having to remove the effective treatment.
That perfectly explains why supervisors and parents love it. Nobody loses their therapy.
Nobody goes backwards.
Right. But the sources also cover the changing criterion design for behaviors that don't need to be reversed. This is where we shape a behavior in step-like increments. Like, you set a goal, the client meets it, you change the goal to be slightly harder, and the behavior tracks the goal.
It sounds super straightforward, right? But there is a massive conceptual flaw students frequently encounter when trying to apply this specific design.
Yeah, the mock exams highlight this exact mistake. There's a scenario that describes a teacher trying to use a changing criterion design to increase a fourth grader's reading fluency.
Okay.
But the student currently only knows how to decode basic consonant-vowel-consonant words, like cat and hat.
Right.
And the teacher hands the student a copy of the first Harry Potter book, sets a baseline, and then creates a changing criterion for the number of correct words read per minute. Why does the scientific community just completely reject this application?
Because a changing criterion design only proves experimental control if the behavior is already fully established in the learner's repertoire. You cannot use this design to teach a novel, complex skill.
Yeah, the gap between the student's current repertoire and the target criteria is just way too vast. It doesn't matter how meticulously you structure your reinforcement steps. If the student literally lacks the prerequisite phonetic skills to decode a complex fantasy novel, changing the reinforcement criteria won't spontaneously teach them how to read it.
Exactly. We use changing criterion to alter the rate, frequency, or duration of a behavior the client already knows how to do. If a client smokes 20 cigarettes a day, they already know how to smoke, and they know how to not smoke.
Right, the skill is there.
So we can use a changing criterion to step that down to 15, then 10, then 5.
And to really prove you have your hands on the steering wheel with that design, you can use bidirectional changes.
Oh, yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, instead of just constantly making the goal harder, you temporarily drop the criterion backwards, say, allowing 12 cigarettes instead of 10 for a phase. If the client's behavior actually reverses and tracks back up to 12, you have absolute proof that your reinforcement contingency is driving the behavior, not just a natural decline over time.
It is a phenomenal way to demonstrate deep experimental control. But, up to this point, we have been talking about interventions as if they are single, isolated variables. We apply the tape. We apply the choice. In real-world clinical practice, behavior intervention plans are rarely that clean.
Oh, they are messy. We throw the kitchen sink at the problem. A standard package might include, like, a visual schedule, a token economy, functional communication training, and an extinction procedure all at once.
Right. And when that massive package works, the clinical director returns with another question. Which part of this expensive, labor-intensive package is actually doing the heavy lifting? Like, do we really need all of it?
That is exactly where we transition from basic experimental designs into treatment analyses. The sources drill down into three specific types that constantly trip people up: comparative, component, and parametric analyses.
Let's pull them apart, starting with the comparative analysis. This one is pretty straightforward. It compares two completely different, unrelated interventions to see which is more effective for the client.
Okay.
For instance, testing a fixed ratio reinforcement schedule against a variable ratio schedule. It is an apples to oranges comparison.
So comparative is intervention A versus intervention B. What about a component analysis?
A component analysis takes that kitchen sink treatment package you described and systematically dissects it. It asks, which specific piece of this puzzle is responsible for the behavior change?
So if my package includes a token economy, verbal praise, and an extinction procedure, and just to clarify for anyone whose memory is rusty, extinction is when we completely withhold the reinforcement that previously maintained the problem behavior. How do we test which of those three is actually working?
You conduct a dropout analysis. You systematically remove one component while keeping the others active.
Oh, oh.
So you might temporarily drop the extinction procedure. You stop withholding the reinforcement, but keep the token economy and praise going. If the problem behavior immediately spikes, you know the extinction component was absolutely necessary.
But if you remove the token economy and the behavior stays perfectly stable,
Then you just learned the token economy is dead weight. It isn't necessary for success.
which brings us to the parametric analysis.
Right. A parametric analysis doesn't ask which intervention works. It asks how much of the intervention is needed. It evaluates different doses or values of a single independent variable.
The sources give a really great corporate example of this. A company knows that financial bonuses increase employee performance. That's not the question. The question is finding the optimal dose. So they test offering a $100 bonus, a $200 bonus, and a $500 bonus.
They are testing the parameters. And if the data shows that performance peaks at the $200 bonus and doesn't improve any further at the $500 level, the company has found the optimal dose and saved themselves a fortune.
I'll actually use a puzzle analogy to keep all these straight.
Oh, let's hear it.
Think of building a puzzle. A comparative analysis asks, should we build the puzzle on the dining table or the floor? Like, which environment is better?
Okay, I like that.
A component analysis asks, which specific pieces are we using? Are we missing an edge piece? And a parametric analysis asks, what size are the pieces? Are we using large toddler pieces or tiny 1,000-piece parameters? So component identifies the piece, parametric measures the amount.
That heuristic perfectly separates the mechanisms, and it's really important to note why we do these analyses. The BACB ethical codes require us to provide treatments that are effective, efficient, and least restrictive.
Always least restrictive.
Exactly. So if a component analysis reveals that a highly restrictive extinction procedure isn't actually necessary, and positive reinforcement alone maintains the good behavior, we are ethically obligated to drop the restrictive component. Fine-tuning our interventions isn't just about satisfying scientific curiosity, it is a mandate for compassionate care.
That is the perfect synthesis. Let's summarize what we have unpacked today. Applying single-case experimental designs is not merely an academic exercise for passing a multiple-choice test. It is the fundamental mechanism behavior analysts use to prove experimental control.
Absolutely.
Whether you use a multi-element design to safely navigate a dangerous behavior or a dropout component analysis to streamline a complex package, these designs are how we ensure our clinical decisions are anchored in objective, undeniable reality. We do not guess, we measure, we verify, and we prove.
The difference between a well-intentioned guess and empirical proof is the bedrock of our entire science.
And with that, we have officially concluded our deep dive into Domain D experimental design. But the journey continues. Coming up next time, we pivot into Domain E behavior assessment. Now that you know exactly how to prove a treatment works, we're going to explore how you identified the root cause of a behavior to select that treatment in the first place.
But before you go, consider this final thought. We spent today discussing how single-case designs prove what works for one specific person in one specific setting at a specific point in time.
Right.
But human neurobiology changes. We age. Our environments shift. If you run a flawless multiple baseline design and empirically prove a functional relationship today, does that empirical proof have an expiration date?
Wow, that is a fascinating limitation to ponder.
If the client evolves and their world evolves, at what precise moment does your previously proven intervention demand to be reproven?
Just because the tape holds the pipe today doesn't mean the water pressure won't shatter it tomorrow. Keep that question in the back of your mind as you evaluate your own data this week. And again, you can find more over at amethysttherapyservices.com. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.